Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Chameleon-Esque Montreal-born German-based drummer and composer Greg Smith. We spoke with him in March about his newest 2021 CD called Cluster 001, out on Brooklyn Jazz Underground Records. It's available on April 23rd, 2021. He was born and raised in Montreal and lived in New York City in the 90s, and he's picked up a lot of experience over the years. These days, he calls Germany home, and he loves it. We talk about projects, his life in music, COVID, and much more. Get to know him and enjoy. Well, hey, thanks for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for taking the interest in my record.
Yeah, without a doubt, man. So let's talk about the record. It's coming out during a global pandemic and a very, surreal time on planet Earth. Talk to me about kind of the timing of this project.
Actually, I had everything done just before the pandemic. I recorded in 2019 and then got it mixed and mastered literally like weeks before the lockdown hit. And at first that really depressed me because I was ready to get some bookings and try to do like a release party live, a little tour around that party. And it's obvious. I mean, everything is down, and so I had to concentrate on doing something online, which is pretty new for me. I mean, of course I work with things online, but to only release music online and not accompany that with a live gig or tour is something new for me. That's for sure.
Well, talk to me about Cluster and what this project means to you from an artistic standpoint.
For me, it's like a culmination of all my experiences, which have been pretty broad. I did play some jazz music back in the 90s. I was for a year in New York City, and I was also on a jazz scene in Montreal in Canada. And then I guess around the end of the 90s, I made the move to Europe. And when I got here, I let go of the jazz thing for a number of years, and I became a beat producer. I'm working with like rappers and singers, and I also did composition work for modern dance companies. It's pretty broad, and I found it fascinating that there was a support for the arts over here in Europe that I didn't have in Canada or the States. So it was a lot of that, let's say. And then around 10 years ago, I got into a jazz project called Lama that had quite a lot of success. We were on a record label in Portugal called Clean Feed, and we played with special guests like Chris Speed, for instance, who we recorded and toured with. And that got me going back into the jazz sphere, let's say. And so let's just say that for a number of years, I wrote a lot of music for a lot of different situations, but I hadn't done anything for myself where I was marketing myself as the artist. So Cluster for me is my first statement, let's say.
So you're in Berlin. Are you in Berlin now?
No, right now I'm in Rotterdam. I'm bouncing back and forth between the two. I have a little one-room place in Berlin that I rent out when I'm not there, and otherwise I'm in Rotterdam here with my girlfriend. But my musical activities have been in Berlin since 2017, let's say. And I found my musicians there. Well, two of them, and the other two come out of Los Angeles.
The thing I always hear about musicians that have tasted what it's like to be, whether it's in Canada or the United States, is that when you get to Europe, it just feels good to have the arts embraced the way it is there. How does that feel?
I'm not even getting the good part. I mean, I heard that the golden age was before I got here. But to me, it seems like a really successful... I mean, the socialist project of Europe was really successful. And it's really strange how, with all respect, it's really strange how so many Americans are scared of the word socialism and there seems to be like a lot of negativity about how certain countries do things over here, heavy taxation and all the support for the arts. I mean, artists should get a real job kind of stuff, I mean, it was a fantastic project, the Socialist Project. And now Europe is becoming a lot more like America. And that's really a pity, because it is a fantastic place. I mean, there's still way, way more support here. And that for sure was a motivation to stay here. Because originally I came, I thought, to check it out and maybe work for a little while. But my intention was always to go back to the Americas. But no, I'm settled in here. I'm very happy.
The unfortunate reality is that politicians have dumbed down the masses so much and used socialism as a very charged up term. And if Americans really knew what it meant, it would change quickly. I mean, half my paycheck just goes away. If we were talking about regular old capitalistic taxation, it's a row. And if you could get health care where you wouldn't have to go bankrupt like most people do if it gets really bad in America, that would be great. And I think what people need to realize more and more as we do come and resurface out of this pandemic, frontline workers, I understand, are the medical people and grocery store workers and all that, and I get that. But I'm more and more believing that the artistic community is the same thing. If we didn't have art, music, TV, film during this time of quarantine, we would be in a really bad place as human beings.
Exactly. And the amazing thing is we were the first to be cut out, right? Like the theaters and the clubs and whatever, the venues, because apparently that is too dangerous. Even with social distancing and masks, it's too dangerous to perform in front of half audiences and whatnot. Meanwhile, the subways in every major city, every single day, are crowded body to body. I mean, it doesn't take a genius or a virologist even to figure out that that's obviously a source of infection. And I think playing in a half-empty club, which is not ideal, but at least we would have something. And they cut that out. And then they say to us, well, look, the people have to go to work, so the subways have to be filled up. But people don't have to go to venues. That's what they say. And I'm like, okay, the supposed regular people don't have to go to venues. But the people who work at venues, the service and entertainment industry and the performers, they need people to come to venues. They need venues. And you've completely gutted us out.
Yeah.
So, they have their priorities, and it's different than our priorities. But nevertheless, I feel really great about being an artist, because it's almost like a political statement to be an artist. And what I'm trying to say is, in the near future, there's going to be a lot of unemployed people. A lot of robots are going to take over people's jobs. This is not new. This is known. I'm waiting to see a robot who can play like Coltrane.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really amazing to be able to play jazz music, to play acoustic instruments, to have that sort of human interaction. I think people might rediscover some things there.
I agree.
Robots have put perhaps 40% of the workforce out of work. What is going to happen then?
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the beginnings of your musical journey. Talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised and kind of how music became your life.
I'm born in Montreal. It didn't really start with music. I don't come from a musical family. In fact, my father was a horseman, and a pretty successful one. And my mom worked in an office. There was always this musical talent that I had. It seemed like I could just sit on a piano and start to play it, or pick up a guitar and start to play it. So in my teens, my parents did help me out to get a drum set, but it still wasn't really the main focus. I didn't really think music was going to be the thing. So I was messing around with a lot of things, and I even worked in an office for a while. I think I got really serious about music the day that I met this great New York drummer who saw me play, and he said, "Hey, you've got something, but you got to get out of here and you got to go to New York. That's where you're going to really get your ears opened up. And so that was definitely an ear opener and an eye opener to spend some time in New York City. And I got to play with so many amazing people who are now famous, but at the time that I was there, they weren't known. And so that was fun to see. I guess in the end, New York wasn't the place for me. It was so much nicer to come to Europe. Maybe if I had gone to New York as a teenager or something like that. I mean, you got to be willing to sacrifice so much and lower your standard of living and just kind of suffer so much to get on the scene there. It's anything from a 2 to a 5 year plan. And after 1 year, I'd kind of had it, you know? So, but I mean, I've always been checking out music. I've always been listening to music. I've always checked out players. I studied even some classical for a couple of years. My influences are broad, and I think I've done a lot of different things. That's why I'm being marketed as a chameleon-esque musician.
What was the first live show you ever saw that really, really motivated you and made you think that's something you want to do?
I mean, in jazz, believe it or not, no, okay. I guess the first live show I saw was Buddy Rich. But the first, I mean, and which was great, you know, I mean, the technique and everything. But I saw Elvin Jones when I was around 19 or 20 years old. And then I saw Art Blakey. And then I saw Tony Williams. I saw all of this when I was pretty young.
Wow.
Yeah. And that made a huge, huge impression. I saw all the masters, Jack DeJohnette. I didn't get to see Philly Joe. I always regret that. That would have been amazing to see.
Yeah.
And that had a huge influence on me for sure. So even when I got away from jazz for a while and had my sojourn into drum and bass and hip hop and soul and new soul and all that kind of stuff, I was never far away from my ears were never far away from the whole improvising thing and the whole amazing looseness, I guess, that the jazz musicians have, the looseness and the openness, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it sure does. Yeah, and you know, you played with some heavy cats, and like you mentioned in New York, and David Benny and some other people. What have you learned from being around highly talented, veteran, legendary musicians that have in turn helped you to teach younger musicians that you get to play around?
The first thing you'll learn is just how dedicated all the great musicians really are. Prodigies are few and far between, and it's always the dedication, the hard work, the practice, the listening, the commitment, and also I think an important aspect is is fearlessness and the willingness to be rebellious. Because if you follow trends, you know, you're not going to develop your own voice. For my favorite musicians, that's what I notice all the time. And, you know, and it's not just about music. It's also, I think, it's life. Because you can't really make great music if you're only thinking academically or scientifically. I mean, there's got to be elements of pain and humor, struggle, so many things, basically, that you need to put into the music.
Yeah. So what do you like the best about waking up every day knowing you're a musician, you're a creator, and you get to do that as your lifeblood?
Well, on a basic level, when you've worked in an office, you're really glad that you're not going to work in an office.
Uh-huh.
That's the first thing. And the second thing is, yeah, it's a gift. I feel like a kid in a candy store that I can wake up every day and mess around and be creative. And there is even a job that I do here. I work in a dance school, and it doesn't really feel like a job because I go there to play for dancers, and I can do whatever I want. I can play piano, I can play percussion, I can play a synthesizer, I can play a drum set. and I'm just making up my own little mini compositions every day. And and out of that sphere, I grew into a ballet composer. I think I've composed over 20 evening length pieces over here. So, yeah, to be an artist is a great thing.
Yeah. You've been down a lot of roads, geographically and in your career. If you have a dream tonight and you run into your younger self around the time that you were getting ready to become a professional, and you could give your younger self one piece of advice from all of this wisdom you've gotten over the years, what would it be?
Don't believe the hype. Don't listen to the noise. Get with yourself. And, as far as studying, yeah, sure. Check out the masters. Listen, absorb, steal as much as possible. But get with yourself. I think I'm guilty of listening to too much of the noise. At least how it affected me is it actually undermined my confidence to just watch too carefully what's going on around me. When I got with myself, that's when I could hear the music that I wanted to make, let's say. And getting with myself means, sure, practicing your instrument, being alone with your instrument, or being alone with a keyboard. But it also means, it can mean a lot of things for a lot of people. It can be meditating. It can be going out in nature. I think a lot of good music got made because of certain kind of drugs people took, because it helped them shut out the noise. I know it's not a very popular thing to say, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
That's what it means, right? To get with yourself.
What do you miss the most about that old world that we've sailed away from? Say, early March 2020. What are you looking forward to getting back to?
When you say that old world, can we go back before 2020? Things have been getting weird for years, right?
Yeah.
CD sales went out the window. So let's just say that basically the internet changed the game. So for me, there's basically the life I had pre-internet, and now there's the life, with the internet. And I suppose you could say COVID has been the next big thing that has changed a lot of things. I just think COVID has sped up a process that was anyway in action, and that is just the way it is. We're just heading to a new life. And I think everybody who's clamoring to go back to the old life, I don't think there's an old life to go back to. I think that is the story of our times. I think we're going somewhere else, and we have no choice but to embrace it. I just think that's the way it is.
I totally agree. I think there's almost a danger in living in that, like, going back to childhood notion, too. That's almost kind of like what this is. It's like, I know everybody wants to get back to the freedoms of just existing and doing things that we want to do, but as far as that old world, I totally understand exactly what you're saying, because I think there's a lot of aspects that have changed that are going to be unaltered as we go back, that will be brand new.
Was everything so great? People were complaining like crazy before COVID came, and I think people will be complaining like crazy after COVID.
Yeah.
And now we're complaining about lack of freedoms, but there's a new social contract coming. I don't think it was necessarily a good thing that when I say we, let's say the majority of people. Some people really cared, but the majority of people, they would go to some third world country and sit on a beach in a resort owned by Germans or Canadians or Australians or whatever, and just hang out there for 2 weeks and not even get to know the people of the country, and then fly back, or go on these eco vacations to places that were never touched by humans before. Maybe this isn't a good thing.
Yeah.
It's possible to think about that, no?
Yeah, no, I agree. I totally agree. I think that's been one of the things I think that has been probably good about humans during this time, is there's been a level of self-reflection and recalibrating what we do and how we do it and why we do it. I know, for instance, in this country, that probably having the pandemic and going through what we went through stopped us from having another 4 years of something that was really bad. Really
Right.
bad. You know what I'm saying? So
I do.
yeah, so just that alone, and then we can account for a lot of other things, like, you know, finally seeing a canal in Venice that's like clear, and to see what lives below it. Things like that, you know, smog going away in Beijing for a while. There's been a lot of things, and I think a part of this too is that at the end of the day, we are not in control, and nature will win and find a way to win, and we are going to have to figure out a way to dance with that.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to redefine what free will means, because, you know, once upon a time we thought free will meant to be, for instance, a cowboy. Just take over anything you wanted in America and claim it as yourself, even at the expense of others, and exercise your free will. And that's the negative side of free will. And I guess this goes back to what I was talking about with socialism, is that, you know, free will, yes, you know, like what you like. No one has to control that. Love who you want to love. Feel how you want to feel. But maybe a social contract is in order. Yeah. Also for the sake of the planet.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Speaking of, you know, getting back to live music, that's one of the aspects of getting back to what we were all used to. When that happens, what do you hope we all realize, both musician and audience, about this time away from live music?
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. Ideally, I would like things to explode, you know, because there's some people who hypothesize that after the First World War, you had the Roaring '20s, right? But I mean, I don't know. I really don't know what's going to happen. But that's what I want to have happen. That all of a sudden we can get out and do things again, and that people are going to realize how great it is to go out and hear live music, and not just put it on the back burner. Also, as far as, you know, as far as the government agenda, you know, like support for culture is in order, because, as I said before, I think a support for a lot of people is in order. You know, as people become unemployed, we're just going to have to change the game, and having musicians, you know, that's going to be a special thing. I mean, all kinds of artists, not just musicians, but, you know, it's like in the medieval times, musicians were called poets, you know, because the musicians always hopefully went against the grain and said things that possibly eliminated certain aspects of life, you know, and that's our role, you know. It's not, and yeah, I hope it comes back.
Yeah,
I really do.
I do too. So everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but you're the one living your life. Who do you think you are?
Oh, I know who I am. I'm more interested these days in just thinking hard about what I'm not, because I feel like I did a lot of things. And I think the question I asked myself a few years ago is, okay, great, you're doing all these things. You've had a success, you've made a living, you bought a house. I mean, those things are hard to do already in music, right? But you know, what do you want to be a master of? And so now I'm wanting to be a master of my craft, both playing wise and composing wise, and also as a band leader, let's say. And that's priority number one, even as I do all the other stuff to pay the bills. So I feel like I know who I am. And I mean, if I was going to be more descriptive, I guess I would say that I've always had a sort of rebellious sense. I don't really want to do the typical thing. And I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, but I need to say something that really feels like me. And you really have to look into yourself and find that. It's really important, if that makes any sense.
Makes total sense. This is great, man. Greg, thank you for opening up. Thanks for your time. Good luck with the album and the return to the stage.
Thank you, Joe. Really, thank you for taking the interest.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Montreal, Kansas City, Germany, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Greg for his time, dedication, and cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.